So hello again, my name is Patricia. We are here in the Yoga Loft again, and it's my pleasure to interview the magnificent Sarah today.
Thank you, Patricia.
And yeah, we skipped the part for the time being where we guys know each other from, because that will be revealed in the interview, I guess, sooner or later. So let's dive straight into the questions, and I let Sarah introduce herself.
All right.
So who are you, Sarah?
Well, I'm Sarah Whittaker, and I come from the United States. Outside of Seattle, we have a national park. It's called Mount Rainier National Park, and I live right at the entrance of the park.
You live right at the entrance of the park,
Yeah.
and more to that later, so you will learn more about Sarah throughout the interview.
Yeah.
But let's start with another question I always ask people: when and where and why did you start yoga?
Okay. Well, my first class that I ever took was in 1995, and I just moved to Mount Rainier, and it was pouring rain. It was the winter, and I was invited to a yoga class. And I went, in a town, the closest town was 25 miles away. So I went, and it was in an old farmhouse, and it was a cool community of some people. And the teacher was one of Bikram Chowdhury's very first students that he ever had when he came to the United States. And it wasn't a Bikram style class, but she was informed. And I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the community that she had already started to build.
Okay.
But I was only there for maybe 5 months that I would go to class 2 times a week.
Yeah.
And then it was in the dawning of the internet, and so I had access to starting to look for videos and VHS tapes online. So I really gleaned from the yoga that she taught.
Okay.
And I just felt like this is a path that
You're onto something
it
here.
was really resonating to me.
Yeah. But not the Bikram style, right?
Not the Bikram at all.
So you found the community nice, or the physicality of the practice, or can you remember what it was?
Both of it, and I had been a trained athlete leading up to this.
Yeah.
To 1995, and what the very first class that I gleaned from, which resonates to me to this day, even in my teaching practice now, was when in a pose and in the sensation to go into the place of your body that isn't having sensation, to go to the comfort, and so it was a paradox of being able to separate a tension, and then but shifting my mindset away from it and not wanting to run from sensation, but to move into a softer, more comfortable, easier place.
Yeah.
And that was what was my hook.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I remember well, did you have your neck injury back then already, or?
My neck had been fused in 1990, and so I was living with a fused neck for 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Always kind of working with different cranial sacral specialists who kept me, in good shape.
Yeah.
But the path of yoga that I've been on since then has really improved the health of my neck.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like significantly.
I'm hoping you reveal what led to that accident and all the crazy shit you are doing in your parallel life as a yoga, but I think she needs to warm up to the camera a little bit more, so let's see, maybe she releases further, else we need a second interview, that's clear. Yeah, I mean 95, now it's almost 2020, so you have a long practice.
Yes.
We've been talking already a little bit about the mindset shift that were happening. Do you see some other shifts now over the years?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the things too back then was this was when yoga had not gone mainstream quite yet. It was just on the dawning of it.
Yeah.
And yoga practitioners were in church basements and in farmhouses and up in the attics of, apartment, brownstones, and just gathering of, hippies and, chanting and oming and mantras and satsang and incense and, and a lot of tofu. And, how I was raised, it resonated to me just because I had some of that background in my childhood as well. And but then as it started to go mainstream, and maybe, you know, the likes of Madonna and other celebrities, Sting, were catching on to the wave of yoga, you know, I think that also helped catapult it, along with the industry of selling yoga apparel, pants, mats, etc., you know, and all the garb, and also watching the trajectory of yoga going from that, you know, the deeper, soulful, metaphysical oming, you know, and tofu, to you know, the commercialization and becoming more of a fitness activity. You know, and I think the teaching practice shifted, where a lot of teachers were being instructed that students, they didn't want to hear about spirit or source or God. You know, they didn't want to hear about Krishna or, you know, Shiva. They wanted to get their yoga philosophy. They wanted to get their sweat on. And
striking a fancy pose.
And striking a fancy pose on a beach in a bikini. So, but being on, you know, watching that trajectory and being in it as well, you know, I bought into the Lululemon. I had some outfits that were kind of cool, and even though I felt like I was still a little bit older than a lot of like the younger practitioners coming in, but I had a very solid practice, which was Ashtanga based.
And do you still see it? I mean, now we were talking a little bit about the entire industry of yoga, how it's shifting. I think there are a lot of talks as well happening about honoring the roots again. So we go back to that. Do you see that as well in your world?
I do. And a lot of the teachers who were of that original lineage, you know, or, you know, like in the 80s and the 90s, I mean, they're speaking out. There's lots of podcasts out there that I listen to, and I honor so much from their experiences what they speak of. But yeah, it's almost like gentle is the new advanced, and also it feels like just teaching more of that deeper excavation of discernment that we all have within, but we lose that now in our culture. And, you know, it's the clickbait and running, you know, from the, you know, the fight or flight into, you know, running from sensation. And now it's more like, let's bring it all back down into a deeper level, be more grounded.
Don't chase the next shiny object.
Don't chase the next shiny object. And also, there's a lot of more trauma-informed based teaching practices, which is really important, especially in this day and age. And what people, you know, now in the world are enduring and, you know, coming across in their lives. And
for yourself, did you see something shifting in your personal practice over the years? Did yoga accompany you through several life crises, ups and downs? And
very much so. When I was on the internet in the dawning and buying VHS tapes, there was a lot of videos out there that were like 20 minutes long. And the first one that I found that was longer than 20 minutes was an Ashtanga practice. And so Richard Freeman, and I purchased it, and it was an hour and a half. It's 90 minutes. And it kicked my ass. And it continued to kick my ass. And so I kept going back to it because I mentioned I was a trained athlete. And so through that, I became devoted to the Ashtanga practice. And I was very lucky to have teachers come into my area. It was a town 40 miles away, and they had just come from India, and they'd come from Mysore, and they'd come from the seat of Patabi Joyce, the Guruji. And so I formed that really structured, basic structured church of yoga, like an old style structure. And as I moved on past the Ashtanga practice, as I got older, and it became more challenging, and it became challenging to teach, now here comes power yoga, vinyasa flow yoga. And for me, it was liberating and artistic and challenging. And as a teacher, because I was starting to teach then, it became like an art form to not have my students get too repetitive in the knowledge of what's coming next.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting, thoughtful path for me to be on as well.
Do you remember, was it physically challenging, or as well stepping out of the primary series, secondary series of Ashtanga to shift your mind suddenly to more flexibility? Or?
Yes, and other poses that open up other aspects of the body.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I still had a lot of, scar tissue and, physical traumas and tension that I was holding within my body for sure. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's so different than the patterning that what I had been in from the Ashtanga, like mostly the primary series is what I did, and I was just embarking on the second series. Yeah.
So a totally different new
new dynamics.
And then you started as well teaching. Back then, if I remember well, was there already Yoga Alliance, by the way, or
Yoga Alliance was not formed, and my teachers, I took my first teacher training, an Ashtanga teacher training in 2001 at the Ashtanga Yoga School in Seattle. And right after that is when I had started teaching a little bit, like in a basement. Okay. And then after my teacher training, I hit the ground running in my little town, in my little mountain town, in a Mason hall. Masons donated the hall for me. Another cult coming in to be in the space. And I started out as an Ashtanga teacher, but the students who came, the people who came, it was inaccessible for their bodies. So I had to shift my gears quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Which made it interesting for me because it projected me to grow more. It made me grow more and study more. So I was also, because yoga wasn't as mainstream, you couldn't find that many studios. So when maybe a master teacher would come into the Seattle area, and granted I lived 80 miles from Seattle, I would run to that studio and sit at the feet of that person, and at that time it was Brian Kest and Shiva Ray and Baron Baptiste and Patabi Joyce and other teachers, and I just felt like I have to sit at the feet of everyone I can get my hands on. And then also going to the studios that were propping up and sitting at the feet of those teachers that were new teachers who were just learning from their teachers. Not a set Yoga Alliance standardized process. But my teachers, when a Yoga Alliance started to form, looked down their noses at it because they felt like how do you standardize the metaphysical aspect? How do you standardize a spirituality that that the yoga, reaches down into your soul and digs your heart out, and how do you teach that? But I do understand clearly, and we all started to understand the need for safety, the need for boundaries, the need for like a set structure. But I still to this day I feel very strongly that go through a teacher training, get your 200 hours or your 500 hours, whatever it is, but it still takes hundreds of more hours to be on the mat, to be in your body, to feel all that sensation and to connect to source, to connect to spirit, when we become that vulnerable from the space that we open up in our bodies. That the yoga brings to us. I had one important question that slipped my mind. I'm talking a lot.
No, it was now I remember. Did you just start to teach because you were like, okay, I'm ready for the next step, or you were like, now I did my training, now I might as well teach, or how?
It was by demand of my friends, and because I lived in a climbing community, Mount Rainier, we had this big climbing community, and there was a couple people who were like, hey, I understand you're doing yoga. I've done some yoga in Colorado. in a church basement. Let's do some yoga together.
Okay.
Yeah, but because then I came from, I had these teachers who were, I had a 6-day-a-week practice. It was very mindful and this was my deal.
Yeah.
And so I thought, oh well, I'll teach to you people what my teachers are teaching me, and it all worked out. It all worked out really well. Yeah, and more people started to come.
And and how do we now make the transition to Yoga Paradise? What happened then in between since then for yoga?
Oh gosh, I took a 5-year sabbatical from teaching.
Yeah.
It was predecessed by my mother's passing, and on the day she called me to say, okay, I'm ready to do this. Let's, come home and assist me in my process of leaving this life. Right when I said, I'll be on the next ferry. She lived on a really small island, and as soon as I hung up the phone rang again, and it was the conference room that I was utilizing as a yoga studio that I'd been teaching out of for 5 years, and they called and said, you're out of here.
No mas.
Get all your stuff out of here. You're done.
Okay.
And it was all within an hour.
Yeah.
My mother's ready to go, and my yoga practice, my teaching practice is ready to shut down because there wasn't any other space.
Okay.
And that was a big message to me, and I took time off from my town and my students, but I continued to teach for Yoga Behind Bars.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm in the Department of Justice system, teaching in a women's prison, and I've been with them for 10 years now.
For 10 years now. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a totally different.
That's a whole nother
level.
Yeah.
And we were talking already a little bit about trauma informed.
Yeah.
So I guess there you got a good
dose of study. Yeah. We all have to be specifically trained, and then we continue our training on, and now more trauma informed teachings are out there for people to access.
Yeah.
Which is a great gift.
It is.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be big things, right? I mean, I just tap into it wherever I can get some resources from, because I'm here in that little island community. But little shifts like, okay, consider thinking about maybe more going into a release instead of an opening. Yeah.
And also understanding what
can trigger.
Triggers are a huge thing, and even in the trainings like pranayama, the breathing can be triggers.
Okay.
Specific. It's interesting because we are not. We are advised to never teach, say for example, Happy Baby, Ananda Balasana, because it can be very triggering, specifically in a women's prison. However, the consensus is amongst my students is they love it. So I'm always like, okay, the correctional officers aren't looking in the window right now. We're doing Happy Baby. And they're like, yeah! Because it helps because they know that they're safe.
Okay.
They've already spent a lot of time with me, grounded, supported, safe. And then when they're in that pose, I speak with them, through them, and help them process whatever dynamics and tension has already been held in there for a long time.
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect, I think, in general, of that. You don't come just into a class and teach your whatever you prepared.
Yeah.
You have to hold space for.
You have to hold
there.
space. Yeah. And for me too. Okay, so bringing you back to Yoga Paradise, that question.
Oh yeah, that was.
Yeah. But I think I can wrap it around here. So. I now have my own studio it's in a 36-foot yurt, and it's a round building, and the space has actually been blessed by a gentleman who works with a lot of gems and stones, and the community that is now in my area that is coming with me to Yoga Paradise. Yeah. So I'm kind of branded as I am Yoga Paradise.
Yeah.
And the community that is there with me, it's a continuum of blessing this space. Yeah. Anybody who walks in just looks around and is blown away at the atmosphere and the vibration that's in the space. And so these students have been coming to me now and supporting me as much as I could ever imagine supporting them. They tell me that I support them, and I know that they do, but we're all like in the collective together. And I was gifted by a gal who showed up. She'd only taken one yoga class before in her life, and she hated it. And then a year later, she was in my class, and she was like, I don't know what just happened, but something's happened. And I think this is what I want to do. And she's very strong, and she came from the fashion industry, and she's a beautiful being, and now she's a farmer. and one day I just was thinking in my head, I want her to become a yoga teacher. I want her to become a yoga teacher. She would be amazing to support Yoga Paradise, to be an addition to Yoga Paradise. And sure enough, a week later, she came to me and she said, I'm thinking of taking a yoga teacher training.
You're a strong manifestor, Sarah. You're such a strong manifestor.
Well, and then I was like, okay, we are going to fast track you. So, because the prerequisite was you have to have a year of yoga under your belt before you can start the teacher training. And she'd had like 5 classes. So we fast tracked. I had her structured in her sun salutations, proper form, strong chaturangas. Like she was like she looked like she had been a yoga teacher for 3 years by the time she showed up for her teacher training. She just now completed it 2 weeks ago. So a huge celebration to her. And I've had her teach classes. I've had her teach blocks of aspects of my classes too. And we all just support her, and whether she's, like doing what is, like classic, proper alignment or not, it doesn't matter. We're just there for her. And so she can hear her voice and speak what it is that she needs to
explore and grow. I mean, basically you have a yoga studio, but you see it more as a community.
As a community, and bringing in another woman is going to be coming in to teach meditation and trauma-informed meditations as well.
And you have a lot of locals in your community?
Locals,
women's only, or how does it look like?
There's men who show up in the summertime who are climbers, and maybe they're in between a program and then they come into the space. And a few of the men who work in the national park have come to class with their wives, and then after maybe the 3rd class are like, there's too much estrogen in the space. I mean, I don't know, but you know what, it's none of my business why they choose to come or not come. And
interesting. Well, maybe in the future you can offer a special class for guys only. I don't know, who knows, right? Who knows. I mean, I just love interviewing people, because here on this little island I'm a little bit, not limited, but you always walk around the same noses, kind of the same yoga teachers, and I feel that a lot of other yoga teachers, they are just grateful if people openly share what they are doing with their yoga life, right? So I think we really need that in the general community in the yoga community overall, to share how does it work for you? What are you doing? And this is how you live yoga. So I really appreciate that you share your path with us.
What a joy.
I'm at the end of my questions. You answered everything I wanted to know. If you want to add anything else, feel free.
It's been such a godsend for me to have yoga in my life. I was raised by agnostics and atheists and cynics, and it was a time for me to get onto my mat when I was in my late 30s and start discovering like my spiritual side, my connection to the universe and to source, and just create more space for me to be more compassionate and empathetic to people in their journeys. And I've felt very strongly that the more yoga that I have practiced, the more vulnerable I have become. And the more vulnerable I have become, the deeper my empathy is for others and for other people.
Yeah.
And you know, and as one of my most favorite teachers has always said, it's like the more space that we can create within our bodies and within our spirit, it deepens the quality of our relationships. And that's what we're all here for anyways, right?
Yeah.
Because we came into this world of souls of pure light and love.
Yeah, with the meat coat.
Yeah, with the meat coat. Well, okay, I'm going to start chewing on that. That's quite the concept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it truly is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are all walking rays of light.
Yeah.
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 And may our yoga practice keep reminding us that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Sarah.
Thank you. And thank you all for anybody who's out there who's practicing yoga. Stay with it, be with it, and if it as it comes and it goes, sometimes you're not practicing, and give yourself that grace. Sometimes it's in my life and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
But it's always there for you to come back to.
It is.
Yeah.
And I'll also provide the links to the website you're currently working on and to your Facebook page.
Thank you.
As well.
All right.
Okay.
Yoga Paradise.
Yeah.